Thanks, Sarah. I guess I'm here. They asked me to come and give you some tough love. This was the title they gave me 6 months ago. Ignore it. I'm Saul Griffith from Rewiring America. We started Rewiring America in 2019 to advocate for electrification, and I think we're doing pretty well. Here comes the tough love, and then I'm going to give you a couple of love stories to finish. So this is a headline from last week in the New York Times, the latest UN FCC report. We have not yet peaked emissions. To hit the 1.5 targets that you all hear about in net zero 2050, we should have peaked in 2016 or 2017. So we're over budget, we're behind schedule. This is the IRA, the worst named piece of climate legislation ever. I had the joy to work on this with a few thousand other highly dedicated people. This is every single piece of the IRA broken down. As you see, it should have been called the Electrify Everything Act. It's nearly all electrification. We celebrate it as huge. Honestly, it's a quarter of what you need in one economy, right? Probably 40% of the US economy was not even addressed. There's practically no industrial decarbonization there. There's practically, the commercial sector was ignored. We did a good job on EVs. We did a good job on electricity supply. We did a reasonable job on residential, but there were big gaps. Why were there big gaps? We didn't have enough people show up to beat the gas industry in a knife fight to write the policy. We've also deceived ourselves globally. These are all the pathways to hit 1.5 degrees as per the IPCC AR6 report. You'll notice that they all go negative, below zero, later this century. In fact, they all go to about minus 10 gigatons per year, negative, later this century. Minus 10 gigatons is the amount of fossil fuels we pull out of the ground every year. So that is as much as the 3 largest industries in the world that we're promising to bury as a negatively priced product later this century. Not very many people believe that we're going to do that. Why did it get written in? There was pretty heavy economic interest. You'll see 2 graphs here. The first one is what you can burn in fossil fuels for 1.75 degrees with all of those negative emissions. On the right, that's what you do if you have no negative emissions. If you look at the delta between those 2 curves, it's about 7,500 exajoules of energy. The wholesale value of those fossil fuels is 37 trillion. The retail value is 300 trillion. So what happened? We promised to pay the fossil fuel industry $300 trillion over the rest of this century to leave the room. They're going to use that to fight against us. That really means that 2040 is the zero target, not 2050. The net and net zero was used to help them get that accounting trick. We need to go faster. We need to go harder. All the ambition that you brought here this week is not enough. This is what led me into the energy space. Ultimately, this is all of the energy flows in the US economy. You can now contemplate it for 9 minutes, and I'll test you at the end of the talk. It's all the energy flow from one side to the other. Really doing this work in detail really shows you how the entire energy system is all connected. To decarbonize nearly every one of those flows, electrification is the answer. That's why I wrote a book with that title. That's why I started Rewiring America. But I think there's something more beautiful about this electrification, right? It is literally all connected, from generation to garden tools, from transmission toaster, from distribution to disco ball. This is a love story about connection. I think it's a love story that America needs to hear. We're politically divided, especially on this issue. So I want you to think about the connectivity of the whole electricity system all the way through. And as you think, I want you to think about the current job you have, but I want you to think about how you could take one of these things. We need innovation in community. We need to change the culture. There's still too many ads on Friday Night Football for gasoline-powered cars. We need to change the regulatory environment. We need to invent new classes of finance for low-income people. The IRA did a great job for rich people, didn't do a good job for poor people. Policy, workforce, education. So as we look at the whole system, think about how you could volunteer, how you could expand your scope at your office, at your work, to help us win further advances in every single one of these things so we can make our ambition for climate change match the challenge. So this is a bit of like the wind turbines connected to the transmission's connected to the solar farm. Solar farm, this is my worst drawing, by the way. I drew all these on the plane. This is pumped hydro, who guessed that? Pretty good, 2 out of 1,000. We got to start thinking, how are we going to electrify the farms, electrify the trucking, let's have some more conversations about high-speed rail. The Shinkansen delivers passengers about 20 watt-hours per kilometre, right? That's 5 times better than a full Tesla. We need to talk about really electrifying our factories, making all the electric widgets. This is starting to happen, still not ambitious enough. We've got to connect that to electrified retail. We've got to do electricity market reform so that the retailer is incentivized to put solar on their car park to sell to the local church, put solar on the roof so they can power the local school, electrify all the vehicle charging. We need new policy around mobility. We've got to think about the outer suburbs and how we connect them more cost effectively. We've got to start thinking about the inner suburbs. 40% of American cars sleep homeless every night. How are they going to charge? A lot of cars go to bed in a basement. Most fire departments are against this right now. So how are we going to reform the fire codes that are a barrier to our electrification plan? Let's have better conversations about nuclear, not just to power AI. I mean, worst headline at Climate Week ever. Nuclear Terminator. What are we going to do for ecosystem restoration that's balancing the transmission and generation requirements? How are we going to electrify our ports, our big cities? Those are connected to our homes. How do we electrify these things? The 5 machines in that picture are 42% of the emissions in the US. How do we fix rooftop solar policy in America? It's completely broken. More on that in a minute. I want to remind you, are you thinking about how you're going to engage with the community on these issues? Are you going to pick up the policy baton when the new administration comes in? We need people to be doing these jobs. The policy won't write itself. The workforce won't build itself. Where are you going to plug in? How are we going to install 110 million electric heat pump water heaters for showers? How do we do another 70 million homes with heat pumps for heat? How are we going to electrify all the kitchens against the cultural barriers of the threat that this might not be able to run a wok? Who's developing an electric wok in the audience? How are we going to connect all the batteries? How are we going to make the battery on the side of the house not cost $1,000 a kilowatt hour when the cells are worth $80 a kilowatt hour? How are we going to educate our children to grow up for this workforce, for this universe that we're creating? And who's going to run the digital apps? Are we going to have divided ecosystems of proprietary and non-proprietary? Does your mother use Linux? Who's going to program their electrified house? We got to electrify our garages. We got to think about those homeless cars some more. We need more mass transit that's electrified. We need to do all the school buses. We need to have more of this. We currently have a punitive transport code that penalizes the electric micromobility solutions we need. We need to electrify all our schools and really give kids the opportunity to participate in the upside of this. In other words, we all have to plug in and do more. And obviously this is why we have to plug in. That's my 10-year-old. So that's the love story about our connection, right? We are 330 million people are connected in this country physically and literally by electrification. Now I'm going to turn to my community. I live here in a suburb called Ostermeer, in a town called Wollongong in Australia. And we just got awarded $12 million to become Australia's first all-electric community under the banner Electrify 2515. Thank you. It's actually a really important story for a few reasons. This is Ostermeer, that's my suburb, that's the demographics. We're almost exactly average, not only for Australia, but for America. 2.7 people per household, 1.9 motor vehicles per dwelling. You can run through the stats. We're part of 6 similar suburbs. That's our zip code. We call it a postcode, 2515. Don't try and do a gang sign with 2515. It's a bit rough in the middle. Here's the interesting thing. So all the grids all over the world were built on the same subunit called the distribution substation. Ours is in Wambar. It's up the hill from my house. It's an ugly thing, usually behind the railway tracks. It looks like that sketch in the corner. Under ours, we have 5 strings. This is literally the physical connection, neighbor to neighbor, of everyone in our community. As everyone in our community does this is electrification. This is what has to happen under that subgrid. The awesome efficiency, we spent 50 years trying to reduce, reuse, recycle. We made single-digit percentages difference in terms of efficiency. The efficiency of electrification is extraordinary. So your house will lower its energy use by 60%. You don't have to shrink it, you don't have to insulate it, you don't have to buy a smaller car, you just have to electrify it. You should probably do all those other things as well, but electrification is the efficiency we need. But what it means is the electricity is going to triple. So we need to deliver 2 to 3 times as much electricity under the grid. Here's Australia's one climate success story. We did permitting reform, regulatory reform, workforce training, and we got the cost of solar 55 US cents per watt installed with an inverter on the roof of your house. That's 3 cents per kilowatt hour electricity delivered to your home. In the US, it's still averaging above $2.50 a watt. That's higher than 20 cents a kilowatt after financing. It's why solar is more expensive than the grid in most places in the US. You need to fix this. Why do you need to fix this? Here's a breakdown of the cost of electricity in Australia. Column A, 28 cents a kilowatt hour to buy it from the grid. Column B, get it for 4 cents a kilowatt hour after financing from your roof. If we have regulatory reform, which we're winning in Australia, and you could do neighbour-to-neighbour sharing, so I can provide solar to the church's solar can occasionally charge our surf club, that'll be about 15 or 12 to 15 cents a kilowatt hour. This really means the cheapest energy system that we can build, doesn't matter if your nuclear energy produces for free, it will not get to the household for less than about 10 cents because it's the cost of the distribution system and the transmission ultimately that dominates. So the cheapest system you could achieve in America maximizes rooftop solar. So I want at least 5 people in this audience to take on the job of reforming AHJs and the solar rooftop market in America. This is the difference. If you're charging a car in Australia from rooftop solar, it's like paying 20 cents a litre instead of $2 a litre. It's the same ratio here. If you're paying $3 a gallon, you'd be paying 30 cents a gallon. This means the economics for a household is extraordinary. We save $800, currently we spend $800 a year on gas, $4,500 on oil, $1,500 on electricity. We have one gas station in our town, sells 3 things that can kill you, sugar, nicotine, and oil. Creates 1 job, and that guy doesn't look very happy. The fully electrified Australian household, with about half of its electricity coming from that cheap rooftop solar, will spend $2,000 a year all in for everything. That's $4,800 a year in savings. This is for a household that earns about $90,000. That sounds great for a household and is, but think about your community. So this is a 2-school, 2-church, 1 surf club, 1 gas station community, 4,000 households, 10,000 people. Where currently our subscription to fossil fuel is $28 million a year. The fully electrified suburb, after we do all of this, will still spend $6 million, we'll still buy some electricity from the grid, but the 2/3 of our energy we generate and share amongst ourselves will mean that $15 million a year every year is spent in the economy. Instead of sending your paycheck on a one-way ticket to Texas and Louisiana every month, you spend that money in your community. You run out of things you can gold plate. You run out of classrooms to build. This is the story of economic renewal that is possible not just in Australia, but in America and around the world when we go after all of that market reform, everything. I'd like to call this movement #mega. I think a lot of people came here a little, it's feeling hard right now, what we have to do. But really, we are underselling ourselves. We are underselling our movement. The real center and possibility for American economic renewal begins in every household and every community, provided we're willing to take on those cultural factors, regulatory factors, policy factors. We need to make electrification great again. We need to make beautiful products. We need to make the future exciting. And just because I'm a hopeless engineer and I can't be a policy terrorist all day, every day, I'll finish by saying, this is what I mean. This is an illegal product in most markets of the world because we have rules that favor cars, not scooters, not bicycles. We're going to launch this in a couple of weeks. I like to call it the shitless horse. My colleagues told me never to say that on stage. It's just like a horse, doesn't take a shit. I can't believe I did that. One of my colleagues is here, he's going to kill me. But I think we're too earnest, right? I think we need to make beautiful, fun things. We need to make the future exciting. We need to outcompete fossil, who are still selling a story that unfortunately is sexier than our story. So I'm going to leave you with that challenge. Thanks a ton. Let's rewire America. Let's do it together.